had 15 minutes to get attention, and I'm a little child, so I have had a cough for a few weeks though, so if I start coughing like an orphan in a Dickens novel, just pretend it's endearing. But I love Janelle Monáe. I picked that song because they're this beautiful black being who doesn't fit into any boxes that we try and put them in. And taking this off. They're just the sort of person I needed to know existed when I was a little black girl, because I didn't think there was anyone quite like me. I was homeschooled, and because my parents didn't think that was torture enough, they also raised us in the suburbs and in mostly white churches. So I grew up really socially anxious and sad, and whenever I tried to ask people to play with me, I would stutter and I'd tremble. And I was such a dork. These church kids would make fun of me, and you don't know shame until you're being bullied by people who are voluntarily wearing jean culottes and listening to a Christian rock band called Jump 5. But when I wasn't being bullied by children of the Lord, the neighborhood kids would sometimes call me things like hockey puck and spit at me. And then at family reunions, because I both dressed and spoke like a black Lori Ingalls Wilder, they called me Oreo. So I didn't really fit in, but because I was homeschooled, I was really close to my brother. He's right there. He's my favorite person. And to pass the time, I would write really depressing poetry on Zanga. But we'd also write plays and like stupid songs to make our friends laugh. And one of those songs was called Dragon Babies. It was a 3-part song series, and there was like music and vocalization at the beginning, and then it said, "That's the sound that a doggy makes when his water breaks. Ahoo, ahoo, so surprised, could have cried when my doggy had a baby dragon." So we excitedly asked our dad to come listen to the song, and we instantly regretted it. He got so mad, and he was like, "What is this song supposed to mean?" Because he thought it was like a euphemism for drugs or something. So Senpu and I had to calmly be like, "No, it's literally about our dog's water breaking. Also, we're homeschooled. This is your fault." And then when we graduated, we went to college together at a small Christian university called GBU. And it didn't fit in there either. I was put on a do not court list by Zachary Syke, who was the hottest guy on campus. And the security guards hated us too. He hated me and my brother and our friends, and he'd follow us around and say we had an aura of darkness around us because we smoked cloves and drank wine. He also didn't like the way we dressed and said that we dressed like we were gay or something else, end quotes, which was fair because we've all come out within the last 10 years or so. And I also used to play a lot of Truth or Dare with my best friend Sheena, and always dare and always making out. And when she got married to a man later, I cried and cried for an unknown reason. But as one does when you're pansexual but in a Christian space, you sometimes end up dating men who hate you. And so I did that and then unintentionally got pregnant. And when I did, the dean found out because I told him. And then I got kicked off campus, despite the fact that I chose life. My parents were moving up to Portland, so I decided to follow them. And it ended up being a really good experience because at USU, where I transferred, I took a class where I read Toni Morrison's The Bri-Skye. And that's a book about a little black girl who lives in a world where she doesn't see herself positively represented, and she's abused and mistreated, And so she starts to fantasize a world where she's happy and well and loved. And sadly, in this fantasy world, she has the bluest eyes. And what she's struggling with is internalized racism and self-hatred, which was the same thing I struggled with as a kid and up until my early adulthood. So reading this book in this class, I just broke down weeping, but not out of sadness, just out of relief at finally feeling seen and having the language to describe my experience. Yeah. That's a really powerful feeling. On a less powerful note, but still important, I also took my first film and health class there, my first film class there, and it was called Film and Health, which is weird, a bizarre combo. And in the class, we had to watch movies about a public health issue. So we watched like Outbreak and Thank You for Smoking and that boring McDonald's documentary. And then for the main assignment, we had to break up into groups and each write our own script about a public health issue that affects the community. But since I was paired with two white guys, white men really struggle with the concept of community. So we ended up writing a script about an individual man who had a very rare disorder called Carob syndrome, which I had never heard of until this kid in my class, this disturbed white man, cornered me, told me all about this disorder. And I don't know if you live a charmed life, so maybe you don't have a disturbed white man in your life. So for the evening, I'll be that guy and briefly explain that Carob syndrome is a disorder where the person who has it thinks that they're dead. I've only heard this one dude talk about it. And then a guy on Tinder told me he had it. And he also said he had a lot of secrets to tell me. And he let me know that he'd never kissed a black girl, so he's really excited to meet me. But since I'm alive, I did not meet this man. But I did write the script with the other disturbed white man. And I didn't take it seriously, of course, because how could you? In all my scenes, I was just trying to be funny because I was trying to impress the guy that I did have a crush on in the class. And he read my scenes and it worked, and he was like, he came up to me afterwards and he was like, Bri, wow, you're like, for a woman, really funny. You could be a writer one day. And because I was still struggling with self-respect, I took that as like the biggest compliment. And I went home and I like was crying, and I wrote this short story about Jack and how he set me on this new path where I was going to pursue comedy. And I put it on YouTube. It's the most cringe thing I've ever done, which is saying a lot. But I am glad, as silly as that is, I am glad that he did give me that compliment, because it did give me confidence. And because of the confidence that I gained at PSU, I went on and got my master's and pursued entertainment and got to work on some TV shows. Carrie Brownstein's dog bit me in the face once. That's the most successful thing I've done so far. But I did experience some struggle, and I eventually ended up being hospitalized for suicidal ideation. And when I was recovering, a therapist suggested that I try and work harder to build community with other BIPOC folks. So I got on Facebook, and on a public forum, I just wrote a sad girl post about being lonely and wanting to find other people like me. And I didn't think anyone would respond, but a woman did named Shrimoyee. And she responded and just said that what I said resonated with her, and she thought that she could relate. So we agreed to meet up, and I was really nervous because at the time I still was like very socially anxious and self-conscious. And I got to the Starbucks and I looked around, and then I see the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen, this petite, dark-skinned Indian woman sitting by the window. And I walk over, and she's so small that her blue baseball cap covered her face. And when she looked up at me, all my anxiety just left, and we talked for hours. And since that day, we started our collective, And we started hosting book clubs and open mics and other cool events for BIPOC folks, and leaning into joy and viewing joy as a valid form of protest. When the pandemic hit, we grew apart, and gotta get a little emotional. I found out in December that she passed away. And when I found out, of course, I was devastated, and I felt isolated again, and I felt feelings of shame and guilt because I hadn't reached out to her in a while. But as I was planning her memorial and a celebration of her life, I looked back over our messages and our texts, and I reminded how much of the work that we did together, it was meant to focus on joy and leaning into that and laughing together, because we live in a world that's obsessed with Black trauma and Black pain. There's so many slave movies, don't need another one. And there's so many clips that are shared of violence against Black bodies, but Shrimoyee always helped remind me that Black people were more than trauma, we're more than our suffering, we're more than our past, and we're the future. We're dance, we're the major and the minor notes that Janelle Monáe sings about. And as I thought about that, I remembered that by learning to love my friend Shree, I learned to love myself and my community, and she taught me that even though life is really hard, and I cry a lot, it's okay to lean into joy, and joy is protest. And it's okay to laugh.